As we get started this morning, we turn our attention to our conversations on CARICOM. As you do know, we had our report coming out of the recently held 44th regular meeting of the heads of government of CARICOM, and out of that came the adoption by CARICOM heads of what we now know as the BRIDGETOWN Initiative developed right here. We're going to break it down, but before we do, with Ambassador David Comissiong, I want to take a look at a recent lecture delivered by Professor Avinash Prasad as he gave further insight also into the BRIDGETOWN Initiative.
Bridgetown is about shifting some reconstruction money from debt to grants and lowering the cost of investing in resilience. So climate change, more devastating floods and more prolonged droughts will not drown us in unaffordable debt. And so we will have the space to do the other things we must do, such as investing in development, in public education, in universities, in health, and in homes. The best measure of whether you have too much debt is whether it's crowding out those things, whether more tax dollars are going to pay interest than spending on teachers, doctors, nurses, and homes. That's not where we are today, but we need the Bridgetown Initiative to keep it so. The people most affected by climate change are the same as those most affected by COVID. And they're the same as those most affected by the global financial crisis. These are just different windows onto the same problem of poverty and inequality. So if you tell me that people are gluing themselves to the road on climate change in the countries that we need to support development finance, but not for the other things we've campaigned on for decades, I say to you, don't dismiss that. Embrace it. For if we address climate comprehensively, loss and damage, resilience, mitigation, we will transform economies, communities, and individuals to be less vulnerable in general.
And so we're joined now by Barbados Ambassador to CARICOM, Ambassador David Comissiong. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Pearson. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. And that's what we're going to be looking at right now, the Bridgetown Initiative and where we are with it. And it's good to hear it broken down so simply as well to show that we're all in this together and that Bridgetown Initiative seeks to be able to address all of this together.
Yes, Professor Prasad made three important points about the Bridgetown Initiative, and we could get into those points and the others that he would not have been covered in that short clip. But it's important that the Barbadian people be fully aware of what the Bridgetown Initiative is, and that we feel that we are part of it, and we take responsibility for promoting it, for talking it up. I say it's important because not only was it formed right here in Barbados, but Barbadian policymakers and thinkers obviously had a very big input into it. It's not just a Barbadian initiative, it's an international initiative, but you can see the imprint of the Barbadian mind in it. And you know, it's being taken up all over the world. At the recent CARICOM Heads of Government Conference, there was John Kerry, the US Special Envoy on Climate, expressing commitment to the Bridgetown Initiative. There was the Minister of International Development of the United Arab Emirates expressing commitment to the Bridgetown Initiative. President Macron of France. So if it is getting traction in so many capitals around the world, it's important that the Barbadian people too lock into it and take pride in it, but take responsibility for talking it up. So Professor Prasad begins with a very important aspect, that is that when countries like Barbados are hit by natural disasters, as we were hit by Elsa recently, those countries that did, have no blame, they did nothing to contribute to those natural disasters. They're victims. In fact, they're victims of irresponsible behavior by industrial countries over many, many decades that created these greenhouse gases that those countries that are hit by these disasters should not have to go borrowing money to rebuild, and therefore putting themselves in even greater debt. That those countries should be able to get grant financing to rebuild. And where does that grant financing come from? Well, the Bridgetown Initiative says those multinational companies, especially the big oil and gas companies, that every year amass billions and billions of dollars in profits, and that are largely responsible for causing the warming of the climate, that those companies should be taxed. A percentage of their profits should go towards providing reconstruction grants for countries that are hit by natural disasters and that did nothing to cause those natural disasters. And not only the oil and gas companies, but it is being appreciated that as the world tries to combat the global warming, that companies that get involved in renewable energy, that there are companies that are going to make massive profits out of the solutions to global warming, and that they too should perhaps give a percentage of their profits to go towards reconstruction grants. So that's one aspect of 6 aspects of the Bridgetown Initiative. I don't know if you want to come in here now, Pearson.
Well, and it also says, what I've heard him to say is that because we're all in this, when we look through our windows, we're all also facing debt crises of many various types, whether it's caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, whether it's caused by supply chains. And so the equalizer is that natural disasters need to be attended to, and you're quite right. So what are the mechanisms within that, should there be a natural disaster, that we can access this funding that will be set aside by these multinational companies? Has that been determined?
Well, we propose the establishment of a global climate mitigation trust. So Professor Prasad speaks about that as part of the Bridgetown Initiative, we are proposing cheaper loans, cheaper financing to finance development. He's making the point as well that, look, issues pertaining to building resilience to global warming, to the climate crisis, that the things you do to help a country and a people to build resilience to global warming will tend to be the same kind of things you do to help people deal with poverty, to help people deal with all of the aspects of poverty, clean water, proper sanitary systems, a proper health system, that these things dovetail. So he's making the point that if you really address the climate crisis, if you address helping countries to build resilience to the climate crisis, you will find that you are also helping them to deal with combating the evils of under development. So the Bridgetown Initiative addresses all of the institutions that go to finance either a response to the climate crisis or a response to poverty and underdevelopment. So, for example, it says to the IMF, a lot of countries coming out of the pandemic are struggling with great debt, are going into debt crisis. So the first point the Bridgetown Initiative makes, it says to IMF, we need to deal with this short-term issue of debt-stressed countries. So you need to step up to the plate. You need to give debt relief and debt suspension for temporary periods to all of these debt-stressed countries. You issue something called special drawing rights that helps to bolster the foreign exchange of countries. You need to reallocate 100 billion of those special drawing rights that you have given to big, powerful developing countries. We need to reallocate them to poor developing countries that are really stressing. So that's one aspect. But then it says to the World Bank, the World Bank group of companies and all the multilateral development banks, look, you have to make financing for developing countries to do adaptation, to global warming, to tackle issues of poverty and underdevelopment, what in the UN system they call the Sustainable Development Goals, that is an end to hunger across the world, an end to poverty, giving people proper health systems, proper education system, proper sanitation system, proper water systems, maintaining the biodiversity of land and ocean. All of these things require much cheaper money because countries have to borrow to deal with these things, but we can't have them borrowing this expensive money that is driving them into debt. So World Bank and multilateral development banks, you need, first of all, you need to expand the amount of money you make available to developing countries to address all of these problems. You need to expand it by at least $1 trillion US dollars, but that money needs to be cheaper. That money needs to be long-term loans. So if a poor country has to borrow to deal with these things, they should not have to repay within a minimum of 30 years. Then the BRIDGETOWN Initiative also says, but look, we have to address the rising global temperature, and we have to provide money, resources, so that countries all over the world, developed and developing countries, can engage in those initiatives and projects that will take them off of fossil fuels, that will help them transition to a low carbon economy, renewable energies, a green economy. That is going to call for lots and lots of money. That's going to call for trillions and trillions of dollars. So the BRIDGETOWN Initiative says, let us set up a global climate mitigation trust and let us capitalize it with $500 billion, 500 billion IMF special drawing rights, which is the equivalent of 650 billion US dollars. But let that be the start. Let that trust then use that initial sum of money to attract and leverage private sector savings and investments all over the world, so that you take that initial 650 billion and you build it up into a fund that is available for borrowing and investment that is at the order of trillions of US dollars, so that fund can then go to finance private sector projects all over the world that have the quality that when they are implemented, they will help to bring the world a little closer to reducing the warming of the temperature. That is, projects that are transitioning the world away from burning fossil fuels and creating greenhouse gases towards renewable energy. So if all three of those things are done, you are helping the entire world. You're helping rich countries, the industrial countries transition to low carbon. You're helping developing countries do the adaptation. If we have to do desalination plants, if we have to improve coastal defenses, if we have to improve housing stock, you're helping them do all of that, but with much cheaper money. And so you're not only addressing the climate, but you're also addressing development for our people.
And so to the skeptic Barbadian, Barbados also benefits from this initiative.
Everyone benefits. And the only other aspect of the BRIDGETOWN Initiative that I might not have touched upon is something that has been pushed by Barbados and Grenada, Caribbean countries. That is to put in your bonds. When governments borrow money, they issue bonds. But to put in those bonds natural disaster and pandemic clauses. These are clauses that you put in your bonds that if you are then hit by a natural disaster or a pandemic, and now though because you have those clauses in your bonds, you will be able to suspend having to make payments on those bonds to your creditors for a period of say 2 years, so that you get that breathing space rather than having to be paying out money on servicing debt. You can use whatever financial resources you have to help you respond to the disaster that has just befallen your country and your people. So there's six aspects. There's six aspects of the Bridgetown initiative, ranging from dealing with the short term, the debt crisis, the short term measures to deal with the immediate debt crisis, to cheaper money to finance development and adaptation to climate change, to long term, let it be long term money over 30 years or more, grants when you're hit by a natural disaster. You don't have to borrow. You should be given grants, and the multinational companies that profit from global warming, they need to finance those grants. The pandemic and natural disaster clauses, and also the core of the Bridgetown Initiative, that global climate mitigation trust that will have a multiplier effect. Right now, the world is not doing enough to keep the temperature rise, the global temperature rise, to no more than 1.5%. And Barbadian viewers should be aware of this. What we are saying is, if we do not hold down the rise in global temperature to no more than a 1.5% increase by the end of this century, then that is going to have cataclysmic effects, especially for small island developing countries like Barbados. So you're talking about more vicious hurricanes, you're talking about droughts, you're talking about beach erosion. So we desperately need to keep the global climate to that level. But if that is going to happen, the world really has to step up. The world has to invest much more money in doing all of the things that need to be done to transition the world away from fossil fuel industries towards a green societies. And that is going to call for trillions of dollars. And the Bridgetown Initiative is the first proposal that has been really serious proposal that has been put on the table that suggests a way of how you can get to those trillions of dollars in investment that is going to be required if the world is going to stand a chance of holding the temperature to no more than a 1.5 degree increase. So especially our young people, we need to become environmentalists. This needs to be the cause of our young people. And you have the instrument, you have with the Bridgetown Initiative, a homegrown instrument that you can embrace to become some of the world's, foremost advocates for dealing with climate change. And this is the kind of message that needs to go out all across Barbados. Let us all, as a national population, let us mobilize around this Bridgetown Initiative that belongs to us, and that is providing a solution to the most significant and fundamental problem facing the world today.
Indeed. Ambassador Comissiong, thank you so much as always for joining us on our conversations on CARICOM and further enlightening us really truly about what's within the pages of the Bridgetown Initiative. Thank you so much, sir. We look forward to seeing you again next week, if it be God's will. Thank you.
Thank you, Pearson. My pleasure as usual.
You're welcome.